If death came a-calling for you, what would you do to try and cheat his grimy clutches? Yeah, I'd do the same. I'd probably have a game of chess with him. Hello and welcome to the Friday Fantasy Show from the Bottled Imp, exploring the realms of fantasy. My name is Ken Boyter, and today we're going to be taking a look at the black and white film. I know, shock horror. 1957. This is Ingmar Bergman's classic, The Seventh Seal. Now, I have never seen this before. Obviously, I've seen it now for the review, but it was one of those films that I thought I should see. I should see it, especially it is a fantasy film. It's under the genre of fantasy films. And if you look at the old classics, you kind of think, well, you got to think about the impact it had during the release of it as well. So 1957, there wasn't really much like this in this era. So obviously it had a greater impact than it would have done. But then films do that. So the big films that have good, great impacts that then go on to become classics normally tend to be going against the grain of what's being produced at the time. So I was curious to find out if it really does deserve that classic title. Anyway, let's find out. The Seventh Seal. So what exactly is the setup? Well, you probably know a little bit about this film because you may have seen the very iconic image of Death playing a game of chess with a knight. And that is pretty much the premise of the whole film. There's a knight, Antonius Block, and his squire Johns. It opens up with them shipwrecked. They've just been cast aside. They're on a beach. They're a little bit knocked out, and they start to wake up, and they're back. They're back home. They're in Sweden, and they have been crusading. So the knight is very virtuous and believes in good and God. And the squire is kind of like the antithesis of that. The squire is very down to earth, almost like an everyman, very earthy, very, realising the struggles of day to day. So you have that nice contrast that runs throughout the film as well. So they wake up, and unbeknown to them, there is a mysterious figure just starting to lurch in the background. And it turns out, when he does introduce himself, it is Death. And he basically says, "It's you." So, the knight, Antonius, is thinking, well, you know what? Is it though? Is it me? Is it really my time? And he tries to sort of do a bargain with Death. And Death sort of goes, well, you'll try and do that. You'll say it's not time yet. And the knight manages to persuade Death that, yeah, just give me some more time. I tell you what, I'll offer you the chance of beating me at chess. If you beat me at chess, then yes, you take my life. If I win, then I can live. And Death agrees. I guess he has more knowledge than the human, as in, well, Death never loses no matter what the situation. But of course the human doesn't know that. The human thinks, yes, I can cheat Death. So that is one of the main themes that runs throughout the film. It's there time and time again. And the knight is actually questioning his own crusade, his own place in the world. Virtue, faith, religion, God, death, life. So it's a heavy film in that respect. The issues are deep. They're looking at all the big issues, just like Douglas Adams did in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And similar to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, there's that lovely contrast between asking serious questions and, really thinking it through and being very, serious about it and earnest. And also a nice juxtaposition of comedy that runs through it as well, because you have the squire that's sort of almost like the Baldric character in Blackadder, or it just reminded me of Les Dawson a little bit, or Jack Dee, if anybody knows those comedians, who are very deadpan, but they've got a very realistic and very gritty attitude towards life. Not necessarily pessimistic, kind of bordering on pessimism, but just kind of like a very level-headed view of life, which is a good contrast. And so there's the comedy that provides the contrast between the serious nature of the big, deep questions and the comedy that is a bit of a light relief. But then the comedy is born out of everyday life. So you can connect the two. It's not like it's totally out of place and it jars. It doesn't. Because when you think about it, life is made up of many facets. There's, sometimes we can be very serious as people, sometimes we could be comedic, and then sometimes comedy comes out of very tragic situations as well. Another big theme is religion. Now, the backdrop as well to this film is that the plague, this is 12th century Europe, and the plague has been devastating the populations of many, many countries, and it's just wiping out millions of people. Now, religion steps in and says, yes, of course, this is God's, and God's disapproval of humans and their debauchery and their wanton ways. And so religion steps in to I guess, try and reinforce their control and reinforce their belief and their right. And so you have religion on a scale probably ramped up because of the plague, and therefore it from that point of view, it reinforces what they've been saying. If you're a sinner, you will be punished. God will show his wrath. And I guess that's really difficult to argue against it. Obviously, looking through that attitude through a modern eyes, nowadays we would laugh at that and say, well, that's ridiculous. Would God, even if there is a God, would God actually want to punish by death? Is that final? And then, of course, you get the whole question of the afterlife, good versus evil. And so it's all interlinked. So there's even a scene where there's a witch she's accused of being a witch, and the crime is that she's been sleeping with the evil one. Just how they know that, or what actually the evil one is quite extraordinary. So in their medieval world, evil actually exists as a physicality. It can be on this plane. It's not just a ethereal object that's just somewhere in the ether. No, it actually exists on Earth, and it can corrupt and it can possess people. And the church sees itself as that moral crusader. And as we know, the church can be quite hypocritical in that respect. So you have various themes. As I say, death is one of the central themes. And so it's not, so you have the plague, not only the actual physicality of the actor playing death, there's an actual actor that dresses up like death, and it's very iconic. You probably have seen that image. But you also have death and life very closely linked. So I guess they're opposites, aren't they? So obviously from, what is before life? Are we dead before life, or are we dead after life? Life is there. So life is also another thing that runs through there. And that, for me, was reflected in the knight and his squire. They go off and they're trying to return home to the knight's estate home. And they come across these troupe of actors, and there's a husband and wife, and they are the opposite. They are the hope. They are the joy. They're the faith, because the knight has lost his faith in God and life because of his time at the Crusades. Whereas the actors, even though they're poor and they're struggling and they go from town to town and they're doing their morality plays, the husband and wife, they're very happy. They can see beauty in everything. They can see the joy and the laughter. And obviously they know hard times. They're not fools. But they choose to be optimistic. They choose faith. They choose hope. And they have a small child. And for me, that's the next generation. That is where the hope resides. And it's a really interesting, there's some beautiful scenes between the knight and the actors, because the knight is after knowledge. His quest, to put it in a knightly world, is to seek knowledge. He wants to seek knowledge about life, about death, about the meaning of life. And so by coming across the husband and wife and their child, he starts to maybe look at faith and religion slightly differently to what he was used to, because obviously he went off onto crusades, and that was all about converting people and showing the world that Christianity was right. So this is faith and religion on an every day-to-day level. And so I love that. I love the fact that you've got the bigger issues, but then you've also got the everyday, and that runs throughout the whole film as well. Now, all of this was based on a stage play that was written by Ingmar Bergman as well. So it's based on his play. And I think it shows, because you've got beautiful, beautiful scenery, beautiful shots that are this film lets you breathe in each scene. And that's an interesting point, pacing. When we're used to very quick films now, very, images flashing and scenes that last for 2 seconds, and you're off onto the next scene. It's all whizzed back. This is beautiful because it allows you to breathe in each scene. So it's like you are the knight. You are also pondering what he is going through, his questions about life, meaning, and death, and all of that. So you do feel like you're going on the quest as well. And I feel that the stage play, obviously I never saw the stage play, I'm not that old, it lends itself, because plays do, by their very nature, they can be very methodical and, pondering the questions and the deep issues of the time. And I think partly this is a classic because of their asking the timeless questions. Every generation will be asking, what is the meaning of God? What is the meaning of life? Is there a God? What's the meaning of death? What is all this about? Is the answer 42? Who knows? And so, obviously, you don't really ever get to the answers, but you might get close, or you think you might get close. And I guess for me, that is at the core of it. It's the journey. It's how you choose to spend your time on this earth. You can be kind, you can be good, you can be polite, you can have friends and be, as I say, be kind. Or you can choose to, be horrible and be evil, if you want to put it in that context. So for me, it is, and it sounds very cliche, it's about the journey rather than about actually finding the answers. So, as I say, there's lots packed in there, there's lots of themes. Theatrics also comes into it, because religion, they try to steal the limelight from the actors when they're putting on their morality play. They have this penance. Do penance, flog yourself and you will become good. You can beat sin out of you. So it's physicality again, it's the show, it's the performance of life that counts rather than words. So it's actions rather than words. The characterization of the characters, they are fantastic. They are archetypes. So you've got the knight equals virtue, death obviously equals nothingness and void, actor, which is again showing the performance of life. But they're done in such a realistic way that you kind of forget that. So it has that mixture. I had that feeling, it felt like I was watching the Canterbury Tales or a morality play, but the characters were real. I didn't think, I've seen these characters before. They had their own wants, their own needs, their own desires, and their own problems, their own struggles. And for me, that really set this on another level as well. They weren't just saying, right, you're a knight, you believe X, Y, and Z. No, this knight has doubts. This knight has everyday problems just like the rest of us. He's not some, godly superhero that is invincible. No, he's vulnerable. And a lot of the characters also have a vulnerability as well. The acting is very solid, it's very good, beautiful performances. The lighting is wonderful, it's atmospheric, and the directing is genius. It really is cool. There's some brilliant dynamic shots that build up tension and atmosphere. Everything comes together in this film, and I can see why it's a classic. Here's something maybe a bit controversial. I'd like to see a remake. I don't normally feel like that with films. It's like, well, why? That film was just brilliant as it was. But actually, with this one, I think if you put it in a director, say like Terry Gilliam, or I can never pronounce this guy's name, Guillemot, the guy that did Pan's Labyrinth, even Ridley Scott, somebody that knows about lighting, knows about the beauty of film and the language of film, plus knows about characterization and asks the deep questions. He's a thoughtful director. And the reason why I'd like it to be a remake is the pacing is a little... I just wondered, for me, I enjoyed it, but I just wondered on a wider context nowadays, would the majority of people looking at this film get bored with it because you can breathe in the scenes? Would they want it faster pace? So I think it would be a really interesting to see a really genius and gifted director take this on and remake it. It would be a huge risk, obviously, because people would say, why are they remaking it? But I think you could do a really good job because it asks all the big questions and you instantly want to connect to that. So I really, really thoroughly recommend it. I would check it out. I mean, normally if you don't watch black and white films, don't worry about that. And it's all in Swedish, so there's subtitles. Again, don't worry about that. You live it. You believe you're there. And for me, that's what filmmaking should be about, that you're sucked into a universe and you exist in it and you want to know about the characters and you want to know the story. So I would definitely recommend it. That is The Seventh Seal. Check it out. The Seventh Seal, yes. So if somebody that kind of looks like death offers you a chance to play chess, I probably would take it. It buys you a little bit more time because they play the chess throughout the film. So he bought him another hour and a half at least. Yes, The Seventh Seal. What I did also want to mention is the humour. There's a brilliant contrast of humour running through it. A little bit of slapstick, but it's not out of place. But there is that everyday earthy humour, as I was kind of alluding to it, where something tragic could happen, but then humour comes from it. And that, to me, really, again, just adds another layer to this film. I would recommend it. This was the 50th anniversary. I think it's 60 years old now. And it does still stand up. I would like to see it remade, though. Again, would it be black and white, or would it be colour? An interesting dilemma. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. We do have lots of other reviews as well, all about fantasy. We've covered books, we cover films, obviously, and we cover board games as well. Until next time, remember to keep it unreal, especially if you play chess.